You're listening to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the community for the best sales and marketing professionals in the aviation industry. You can't learn to fly just from a book. You learn from other pilots who know the tools, the skills, and the territory. Your hosts, John and Paula Williams, are your sales and marketing test pilots. They take the risks for you and share strategies, relevant examples, hacks, and how-tos. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a thing.
Welcome to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, episode number 95, Sex Sells.
I thought this was a family show.
This actually will be our PG version. Actually, the title is probably as racy as we're going to get, but we do have a few bombshells, pictures, and other kinds of things that we're going to show about the history of sex in
Sales.
in sales, especially in aviation. So if that bothers you, you may want to skip this episode. If that does not bother you, then carry on. I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
To help all you ladies and gentlemen out there sell more products and services in the aviation world.
absolutely. So if you use the hashtag AvGeekMarketing, that's AVGeekMarketing, we will find any comments, questions, or anything else that you use and reply. You can also post comments directly on the YouTube video or the blog post or wherever it is that you find this, and we will do our best to reply to every single tweet, right?
Yes.
Okay. So big ideas. Newsflash. Sex still sells. Also newsflash. There is a downside.
Or could be.
Or could be, to using some of the tactics that we're going to talk about today. And so we're also going to talk about how to minimize the downside. So this is a judgment-free zone. We're just going to be talking about the tactics that people have used in the past, how they worked for them, how they may not have worked, and other kinds of things. We're going to leave it to the ministers and others to decide whether or not any of this is ethical. Personally, I think as long as everybody's a happy participant in a marketing activity, there's probably not a whole lot wrong with it, but I suppose you can carry anything to the extremes, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. There's always the question, is this outdated? Does sex still sell? Does it still work to hire pretty girls to stand around an airplane or to be in a photo shoot or to be at your trade show booth?
Now wait just a minute. We got lots of pretty girls that own airplanes and companies, so you probably want some handsome guys in there too.
Exactly. And, handsome guys. So, it's equal opportunity. The problem with the whole equal opportunity thing is that the demographics in the market for aviation products and services is so heavily weighted on the male side that you're going to see a whole lot more show girls than show guys at any of these events, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that said, we can debate about what it should be, or what we would prefer. Personally, I would prefer to see a lot more, show guys than show girls, but, I don't get to make the rules. So
not only that, but we're going to talk about what works, not about what should, woulda, coulda.
Exactly. This is a discussion we have with just about every client that we have at some point or another. Marketing is not necessarily about what you like or what you dislike. It's about what's going to work and what's going to attract or repel your customers or your ideal customers.
Exactly.
And, this, of course, has to jive with your own ethics and values and comfort level, because if you're uncomfortable, then your sales abilities go out the window and your motivation goes out the window as well. So there is an element of that as well. But is this outdated? Is, the idea of having booth babes and other kinds of things outdated, or are there still people that do it? I have to say that there has been a pretty marked decrease, probably over the last 5 years, in the number of apparently less than intellectually qualified people who hang out at trade show booths, people who are just there to wear the outfits and, just to visually attract attention.
The demand now is for the good-looking ladies that are intellectual and can apply all this, like our magician did, to the product suite at hand and use it to sell,
right.
Not just to stand there and say, look at me.
Exactly. There are 3 or 4 different agencies, talent agencies, where you can hire people for your booth. But the emphasis, if you look at their websites, the emphasis is now quite a bit more on, other kinds of things and not just necessarily standing there and being a photo op. This photo is actually from NBAA 2015, which was the last time it was in Las Vegas. And there were actually quite a few booths that kind of capitalized on the Las Vegas theme. This one is a fuel company that put together a photo op, which is not a bad idea. Come to our booth and get your picture taken with the showgirls. Those kinds of things. But in a lot of cases, the talent agencies are going a little bit more professional, a little bit more low-key, I would say, wearing more clothes. So these photos are from NBAA 2016 in Orlando last year. This is one of the talent agencies showing, their folks that were representing booths at that show. And you can see some of them are very professionally dressed, and these are the folks that have probably memorized at least 1.5 pages or 2 pages of material, the basics about your organization, your product and your service, and so on. And some people are just there for looks, and there's nothing wrong with that because this is a trade show after all, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. There's also a lot of traditions like the Charlie Bravo calendar. There's a lot of young ladies in this calendar. It's kind of spinning off the theme of the World War II nose art, paintings of women on the nose of an aircraft and things like that. So there's a really strong tradition there, and I would say as long as everybody who's involved in those kinds of things is a happy and willing participant, that's great. And as long as your customer base, or at least the vast majority of your customer base, is in favor of this, I'm all for it. And Charlie Bravo is a woman-owned company, right?
Yep,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, hard to find things wrong with this. You'll also find, and we'll talk about this in a minute, that there are, calendars of men, usually not in aviation because the demographics are wrong. So what's good for one, I guess, if we have to be equal opportunity equal opportunity marketers, right? Mm-hmm. This is another one. Scott Slocum has been a guest on our webinars and podcasts in the past. He's a photographer that also runs the Bombshells company that puts out a calendar of bombshells with warbirds and other aircraft, and I think he also does one with vintage cars. And
yeah, I think he does as well.
Right. He also does a lot of air-to-air photography and other fabulous stuff. But, and he actually came on a webinar that we had a couple of years ago and was talking about this. And I think even his daughter was featured in a calendar at one time. Mm-hmm. So, it's a family business and this is a tradition. So, there's a lot to be said there. And they do sell a lot of calendars.
Yep, they do.
Okay. What is the tool company that used to do a calendar? Was there a Snap-on?
Yeah, Snap-on used to have one. It was a little too radical for this day and age.
Yeah, okay. Cool, right, exactly. And if you have, like I said, if you are in a business in a very religious area or something like that, you may not want to have the Snap-on calendar on your wall, especially where you've got people coming to board an aircraft and other kinds of things. So you really do want to be sensitive about these things and make sure that you're reading your audience correctly, because there is some sensitivity about this. And, that's one of the risks involved in this. There's a lot of folks in the industry who are the numbers of women in certain parts of the industry are, there's a lot of effort to try and increase the number of female pilots, increase the number of female mechanics and other kinds of things, especially in the parts of the industry that really need the numbers. So, it's not such a radical idea, right? And most of the folks that we know in the industry have, wives and daughters or are women themselves. And, of course, are not going to go too crazy with this idea, right?
Probably not.
Probably not. Okay. I was
They'd go crazy with this idea, though.
I tried very hard, I have to tell you, to find an example of sex being used in a advertisement for an aviation product or service, or a calendar or anything like that used men. in
Could
that.
have stuck an airplane in there and there'd been firefighters, right?
There you
They
go.
use firefighters on airplanes.
Yeah, they do use firefighters on airplanes, so I guess that's sort of sort of relevant. This is a firefighter calendar that's really popular, so it does go both ways, and so it's definitely a phenomenon that is not going to change as long as people are people and biology is biology, right?
Nope, doubt it.
Okay. So, the demographics of aviation are such that, regardless of what we want, our target market often is men.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really any way around that. If you look at the FAA data of people who have certain FAA certifications, and this is for pilots, but you could look at a similar one for A&P mechanics, other types of ratings that are issued by the FAA. And, the vast majority are men, but, it is a very small percentage of women. But that number is growing, and it is also a very loyal audience. If you sell something for female pilots, I noticed on one of the groups recently on Facebook, if you sell shirts for female pilots that are, made like women want them to be made, you could make a heck of a lot of money. There are opportunities for products for women in the aviation industry. So I think that's definitely an untapped market that would be very faithful to you. And, we talk about how in aviation we specialize in very small niches of people who have a specialty and so on. There's a specialty for you that I don't think is being served as much as it could be.
Yeah, but even if it were, would it be profitable? That's the key.
That is the question. But I think the numbers are, in that group there's 7,000 women, who are looking for shirts. So, it's smaller than the number of men, but still, if you made 7,000 shirts, and that wouldn't be a terrible thing, right?
Yeah, but if you made $10 a piece, it's only $700,000 or $70,000. I mean,
true, but as a line item in your,
if
product
you already
line,
make shirts, yeah, that'd be cool.
yeah, absolutely, and it might be just a simple modification, But anyway, so back to advertising. We can talk about product development another time, but the purpose, the reason that they use sex in advertising and have since the beginning of time is because it gets attention. There are very few things that get attention as quickly or as easily as sex, gender, and so on. One of the key things about this is that the attention can go the wrong way. So, if you are trying to attract a specific audience to your booth, and we've had a lot of people come to us and, when we talk about their strategy for trade shows and things like that, they don't want everybody and their dog at their booth. They just want
everybody without the dog.
They actually want just people who are likely suspects or likely prospects for their product or service. And if you have a bunch of cute girls in skimpy outfits, that's not necessarily going to attract just the people who are interested in insurance for radial engine, whatever the specific nature of this product or service is. Mm-hmm. So it's just like when we used the example a few weeks ago about giving away iPads in your contest. Everybody wants an iPad.
You're not giving away these girls.
No, you're not giving away these girls, but you might be giving away the opportunity to talk to them or get your picture taken with them or, whatever the situation is.
Yeah, I know what you're trying to say, because those iPad things, I go put my business card in every one of them.
Exactly.
And I don't even care what the product is.
There you go. And see, there's a lot of folks at these shows that will go get their picture taken with the showgirls, regardless of whether or not they have an interest in Phillips 66 fuel, right?
Or whatever.
Whatever the product is. So,
and we don't know that Phillips 66 uses these girls. That was just something she threw out there.
A picture of
we
Phillips
do.
66 in NBAA 2015 with the showgirl in
Was
Las
that Phillips
Vegas.
66?
Yes, it was.
No. Okay. Never mind.
Exactly. The purpose of sex in advertising is to get attention. And how you use that attention once you get it really has more to do with whether or not this is effective than whether or not you use this or something else. Yeah, it's just like
inbound marketing. Once you have the lead, you got to do something with it. Once you have the
Absolutely.
attention, if you don't do the right thing with it, then you're screwing it up.
Exactly. And, in a lot of cases, either, with an advertisement with a beautiful girl in it or in a trade show with beautiful girls in front of it or whatever, you know, that may attract a crowd, but it's not going to generate any sales without having a good
follow
through and a good system and a good product and service and everything else behind it. So this is not going to fix all your problems, but it might increase your sales if it's used correctly, right?
Well, it should increase the number of people that pass by your product.
Absolutely. Okay, so there are some folks, for one reason or another, who don't want to use sex as their method of getting attention in ads or in trade shows. So let's talk about ads for a moment. There's lots of ways to get attention in advertisements. One of those is airplane porn, beautiful photos of airplanes. That's a pretty obvious fit for this market, don't you think?
I would say.
Okay.
Or helicopters.
Yeah, absolutely. So aircraft, whatever it is that your customers are into. So, if you sell a product or service for small piston aircraft, you want to use beautiful photographs of small piston aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
If your product or service is for business jets, then of course you want to act accordingly and, find the most beautiful shots you can get, or commission beautiful shots if that is in your something that's really important to you, to get those shots and get that attention. Stock photography is not quite as effective just because there's a limited amount of it out there, especially for specific types of aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
So those photos tend to get bought and used a lot, and by a lot of different ad agencies and a lot of different companies that are selling different products and services. So if people have seen it before and it's a regular thing that they run into all the time, it's not going to be as effective as something that's really original and that you've done yourself, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it might be worth hiring a real photographer to do some custom photography for you. Another thing is faces, especially smiling faces. There is a reason that the Wall Street Journal, which has hardly any visuals at all, does these types of drawings of people's faces, right? They attract attention, and they show character, they build credibility, they do a lot of things that the Wall Street Journal wants to do. The interesting thing is that the shape of a smile actually produces a similar effect, even if it is not on a human face.
Oh yeah, I know. The front end of cars are the same.
Exactly. The front ends of cars, a Coke can, smiling, lots of things will smile at you, even if it's not actually smiling. Storytelling is a really great way to get attention. We've been taught since we were this high, when somebody starts telling a story, that we sit down and shut up and listen, right?
How
something
high?
really
How high
good.
is this high?
Huh?
How high is this high?
Well, since we were 3 feet tall, or shorter than that, when somebody starts telling a story, you shut up and listen because you want to hear the end of it, right? Video. Here's an example that uses video and whiteboards. This is actually from a company called Moz, M-O-Z, and they do a lot of nerdy search engine education. Rand Fishkin, he is a real character, and every Friday he does what they call Whiteboard Fridays, and does maybe a 10-minute video about something that's very important in search engine optimization. And he does examples, he does visual aids, he does symbols, images, everything else. He's got a really elaborate whiteboard that's always the centerpiece of his videos. And, so he'll go through this and probably destroy this whiteboard in the process of doing the video, because he's explaining these concepts and setting this up. And, sometimes his whiteboard will be just all drawing. Sometimes it'll be really packed with content like it is here. But what he does is very visual, and it's almost a stand-up comedy routine that's very physical comedy, while he's trying to teach these very esoteric concepts, just to make it more memorable and good storytelling and not boring. So images, symbols, all that stuff, very good ways to get attention without involving sex in any way, right? So there are other ways to do it that are just as effective, or maybe even more so, depending on your product or service, right?
Unless his cohort was female and could do the same thing.
Well, it wouldn't matter. She's dressed like that doing exactly the same thing. I promise you it would not be about gender, That's, So there are other ways also to get attention at trade shows. These are some of the categories that were on some of those talent boards that I was talking about earlier. You can hire people to do any of these things, all of which are really interesting at a trade show. If they are used correctly, if they are targeted at your primary prospects, if it's something that they would be interested in, and if it's tied in really well with your sales process, so maybe while they're getting a foot massage, they're listening to a sales pitch. You got to tie this in so that it actually works to get you more sales. Otherwise, you're simply spending money.
And not all of these things work with all products.
Yeah.
At one of the shows we went to, a couple shows a couple years back, they had a de-icing machine on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And you could actually sit in the chair and de-ice an airplane visually. They had a monitor set up, and when you were moving the controls, then you were actually moving what was on the monitor on a real airplane.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how they did that, but it's pretty interesting because anybody can climb up there and start moving the controls, and it would show you what you're doing.
Yeah, once again, a very visual, very physical thing that gets you involved with the product. Now, all of these are separate from the product, you'll notice, unless you go an extra step and tie it in. And we did that with a magician who did a really good job of incorporating our concepts and our key sales messages into his tricks.
Yes, he did.
And there's a lot of ways to do that. So if you've got somebody who's really good at sales, who also has this other skill, there is a way, sometimes very cleverly, to involve that. Now, of course, you can always resort to doing a product demo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is directly related to your product. None of the rest of these are. So, if you do any of the rest of these items, you're going to have to work a little bit harder to make sure that it ties into your sales process.
I will throw a tip in, though. I mean, we have used the magician,
Mm-hmm.
and we did a trade show for another company, and they used the same magician.
Mm-hmm.
And in each case, the people running the show came to us and asked us what we did because we had the most traffic of any booth
Right.
in each show, and they were completely separate.
Yeah.
I mean, one was military and one was civilian.
Right.
So, magician, a good magician, not good with the magic, but good with talking the product, talking your process, talking what you're selling, and selling for you is worth it.
Right, exactly. And now somebody's going to, I'm sure, point out, so I'll point it out, chair massage is in here twice. That's probably because I think that's a really good idea at a trade show, especially by about the third day when everybody's just like dying of, fatigue and everything else. So, but all of these can be done very, very well and can tie in very nicely to your sales process. All right. So the big ideas from this episode: sex still sells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Also, there is or can be a downside to using those methods, and we talked about some of the ways to minimize the downside, right?
You bet.
Okay. So if you have a situation you'd like to talk with us about, we do free 30-minute consultations. You just go to consultation.aviationbusinessconsultants.com. There is a short little questionnaire that asks you some nosy questions that will help us come prepared to give you good advice at that consultation. The consultations we do are confidential, so even if you've got a sticky situation that you really need some help with, aviation is a very small world. We understand that confidentiality is a very important thing, and we promise to honor that. But we also promise it will be very much worth your time for any sales or marketing scenario that we have probably run into before, possibly more than once, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Once again, judgment-free zone. We're not going to beat you up too bad about what you have done that we may not agree with or whatever, right?
Doesn't matter if we agree unless we disagree for purposes of your betterment.
Exactly. All right, so subscribe to our podcast on Stitcher, iTunes, or Google Play, and please do leave us a review. Those actually do help us get found by more people, and the more people in aviation are doing good marketing, the better for the industry and the better for all of us, right?
Right.
Absolutely. Have a great day.
Thanks for joining us for Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying. the best place to learn what really works in sales and marketing in the aviation industry. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating.